All right, so in this lesson, we're going to start solving the rational equations. All we've done so far is simplify them, join three rational fractions together as one. So now we're going to get into the solving. And remember that solving means in the final answer, it's going to be x equals. But first, let's talk about some restrictions. So remember that when we have a denominator like this, we cannot divide by 0. Or like this. Our calculator will say error. So our denominator can never end up being a total answer of 0. So what we're going to have to deal with is what would make that denominator be a total number of 0. So if I have to figure this out, I can either do this mentally, or I can solve each denominator by setting it equal to 0. But in essence, what you're doing is you're trying to figure out what x cannot be, because that would make the entire denominator equals 0. And then once we get done doing that, we're going to go straight into this. So the first section here is it's already going to set up in a proportion format, because a proportion is one fraction and an equal sign and another fraction. And then we're going to cross multiply, and then we are going to solve normally. Now when we get done solving normally, we have to make sure that the restrictions didn't end up as one of our answers. And if it does, we're just going to cross it out. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to cross multiply. I'm going to cross multiply here. But before we get going, okay, what would make this entire denominator? So 5 times what equals 0? So x cannot be 0. And over here, what minus 7 would end up being 0? So x should not be 7. So those are our restrictions. So now let's cross multiply. So we're going to go 2 times 5x, and we're going to go 3 times x minus 7, which gives us 10x and 3x minus 21. Now we just solve normally. This is a linear equation back from Algebra 1. And since we got an answer of negative 3, it's not one of our restrictions here, so we're good. Alright, so let's look at our restrictions here. So what plus 3 would be 0? Negative 3, right? So it cannot be negative 3. And then what minus 3 would be 0? So our restrictions are we can't get 3 or negative 3, but we're going to cross multiply here. So we're going to go 5 times x plus 3, and we're going to do negative 4 times x minus 3. So we get 5x and 15, and negative 4x plus 12. We're going to add 4x to both sides. We're going to subtract 15. We're going to divide by 9. And then we look. Nope, it's not negative 3 and it's not 3, so we're good. Alright, so on this one, before you can see the restrictions, you might want to factor this out. Okay, so our denominator here is really x and x minus 1. So if this were 0, 0 times anything is 0, so that's a restriction. We cannot get 0. And what number minus 1 would give us a whole answer of 0? 1. And then over here, our restriction is 1 again. So our restrictions are 0 and 1. And now let's cross multiply. So we're going to go 1 times x squared minus x. We'll go 2 times x minus 1. So x squared minus x, 2x minus 2. Now this one is different because there's a squared. Whenever there's a squared, we want everything on that side. So we're going to subtract 2x, and we're going to add 2. We're going to combine any like terms we have, and we have a trinomial. It can be factored, so let's factor it more. What numbers multiply for 2 and add up to negative 3? And then we solve by setting each one of these equal to 0. And then we're going to add 2, and we're going to add 1. But our restriction over here said we couldn't get 1, we just got 1, which means we did the math correctly, it just is not going to work. We call that an extraneous solution, but the other one will work. So if it's already set up in a proportion format, go ahead and cross multiply.